In this video, I'll have to survive 100 2.2 levels, from levels that abuse every new feature to brutal platformer demons. On top of that, every time I complete a level, there's a 5% chance that the difficulty will increase. With no skips, is this challenge even possible? Let's start off with the easy difficulty. Level 1 would be the Golden Tower, where I'd have to ascend up the tower in the new platformer mode. Despite the UFO being nice to see in platformer, the level is overall really confusing. I read on what I thought was a RuneScape sign quest for a coin and ended up somehow beating it. Pretty short, huh? Speaking of quests, I would then play Castle Quest, which is surprisingly high quality for a 2-star, and has some unique puzzles that aren't just generic key mazes. Unfortunately though, it's super short, with people being able to beat this in under 30 seconds. Level 3 would be Living in Haze, where I'd somehow die on a 1-spike jump halfway through the level. It can't be my skill issue, it has to be the new physics, man. This game is dead. Jokes aside, I would soon beat it afterwards, even completing a new quest. Time to buy this new icon like I already don't have icon hack. Oops. After spending my geometry cash, my broke ass would ascend into Rags to Riches, which is a Roblox simulator in disguise. The objective is to collect as many coins as you can as they respawn every few seconds. Riveting gameplay, I know. Anyhow, I started on a good pace and ended up even beating this challenge for a special reward, which proved to be a complete waste of time, as it only gave you 25 gold a second, which may not seem bad until you realize the later rooms give you thousands of gold for simply existing. Anyway, I would zoom through all the floors and was even able to get to the final one, where it ended off with 250,000, still not the 500,000 needed for a coin, unfortunately. How is that even possible? After quickly attempting Joyous Whimsies, I would move on to Triglav, which would take a lot longer than all the previous levels, due to the fact there are these shards scattered around the level that you have to collect, which I thought were for user coins, so I didn't bother getting them, until I approached the end of the level and noticed that you had to get every shard. So I had to go all the way back and get these two I forgot to snatch. While the level isn't the worst and had some nice camera movement, the decoration is more confusing than a weekly demon, and the shards thing should have been explained better. To my dismay, normal levels would soon be rolled. Incredibly unlucky for such an early run, but I decided to keep pushing. Nothing was going to stop me. Level 7 would be Frost Cavern, which was created by the same person who made Castle Quest. How on earth are these creators so fast? I don't get it. The level's fun and solid all around, and I'd easily beat it first try. These quests want me, bro. I would then stumble upon typical GD Roulette, where I'd start off with 5 keys and I could use one to get a spin on the wheel. This would range from completing demon levels, getting a few stars, or resetting all of your progress. This wasn't going to be easy. I would start out with a lucky spin, receiving 500 orbs, which I would spend in the shop. After looting this room full of potential gambling addictions, keys, I would begin blowing all of them on spins, until the bad roll eventually happened. I would get the demon level. This was bad. If demon levels were so common on the wheel, this roulette would take ages to complete, until I realized that this maze was easier than an auto level. Things would continue to go splendidly until I was on my last 5 keys. I had 2,000 orbs and 70 stars. If I were to get 500 more orbs, I would be able to purchase the last 20 stars I needed to exit the level with 1 coin. I began to wonder, was this all worth it? I clearly had enough to escape. That coin didn't matter anyway. It wasn't worth losing all of my progress. Who cares? I went for my last spin and got 500 more orbs. After completely lucking out and not getting a single reset in my run, I decided to end it there. My ass is not losing this perfect run. Fun fact, you're watching a Geometry Dash level right now. Creators seriously need to chill out. It hasn't even been a week yet, and we're getting masterpieces already. If it weren't for the pause icon, I wouldn't be able to tell this apart from a real game. Off the bat, I quickly noticed that minigame levels finally have good controls now, unlike the garbage in 2.1. Despite my awful pace, I was still able to get a coin somehow. Not gonna complain though. Level 10 would be, I'm not gonna even try to pronounce the name. The level's a fun duel level. Surprised I was able to attempt it first try, even though it's a 3-star. I think that says a lot about my skill. In Jut Tower, I would ascend up this tower, but when I reached the end, there was nothing there besides Rattledash, who would tell us that he doesn't know how to get us out of here, but drops a hint that there's someone else in the tower who could help us. After going all the way back down, I saw Rattledash Jr., who broke the space-time continuum and summoned a portal out of the level. While I did have good pace, I couldn't beat this very legitimate player who beat this in less than a second. Hats off to him. Let me do an experiment. Close your eyes and try to visualize an early 2.2 level. Try to imagine all the details from the gameplay to the decoration. Now open your eyes. Whatever you had in mind was wrong, because it's this level. I'm not lying, this isn't speed hack. This is the actual speed of the level. I swear, the time warp trigger was a mistake. Anyhow, this whole level is a mess and I barely knew what was happening the whole time. Not to put on my thinking space cap, but how on earth did this get rated? Seriously. Level 13 would be Super Mario Bros. Level 1, which would be an insanely faithful recreation to the original. The creator had a similar level in 2.1 that I absolutely bashed in one of my older videos for having bad controls, but now the level plays extremely well due to platform mode. Who could have guessed? Level 14 would be Particle Accelerator, which was made almost entirely out of particles until the first part ends. I would have loved to see the level fully explore the concept of a particle-only level, but oh well, it's already over. I'm a bit unsure why so many 2.2 levels are shorter than the normal category's lifespan, because unfortunately, hard levels were rolled. Things were about to get hard. See what I did there? Our first hard level would be Ancient, where I would have to fetch a bunch of keys like I was playing Garden of Banban. The level isn't the worst, but can people learn to put checkpoints in their levels? It doesn't hurt the gameplay, in fact it benefits it when it's possible to die like this. I would understand less checkpoints if I was fighting a boss, like in the sewers, but this is just a puzzle room. Despite that though, Rattledash is here, so this is the best level we've seen so far, no question. After this, I would have to fight this huge spider in Steel Haze by shooting green fireballs. Seems familiar. Despite having a surprising amount of attacks, they were no match for me as I had incredible dodging skills, or the regeneration was super lenient, but I prefer the former. Even though I was hit several times and nearly died, I was still able to clear this, something I couldn't say so much about Don't Touch Spikes. The premise is simple. When you hit a wall, you reverse directions, and try to survive for as long as possible. It really reminds me of Dangerous Spikes, which actually used to be in the Spike Gauntlet if you didn't know, before getting replaced with this. Maybe that's a good thing though, because this is AIDS. After this, I would play Cold Feet, and off the bat, the ice physics just don't work here. I'm unsure if these are vanilla ice physics or custom physics made for the level, but it doesn't feel natural whatsoever. We soon bump into this ball who's an absolute yapper. Seriously, speedrunning this level would be impossible with how many cutscenes this ball forces upon you. In one of the rooms, you had to complete a puzzle that would activate a bridge for the ball, and the whole time I was hoping that the bridge would fall apart halfway through and kill him. But oh well, reality is often disappointing. While some aspects of the level are creative, the yapping seriously brings it down. What was also insane was Mystical Mycelium, with graphics that look straight out of something like Rain World. This is how you use shaders correctly, not this mess. The gameplay also plays pretty well, but please, I'm begging you, don't mix the ball and arrow trigger. Every click made me feel like I was having a lobotomy. Ruin Tower had a very interesting concept of defying the laws of physics and decreasing the gravity as the level went on. Surprisingly, my clumsy ass somehow got all of the coins in the level, allowing me to complete a juicy quest. Despite this victory for the OGs, I quickly realized I wasn't special after checking the speedrun leaderboard for the level. How on earth did this dude beat this in 24 seconds? I don't understand. Maybe if I buy their icon from the shop, I'll be able to harness their speedrunning powers. Wait, who put moving obstacles 2 by Samsar here? Okay, this might be cheating since technically this isn't a 2.2 level, but shh. If I'm gonna suffer, I'll suffer in style. Anyhow, I don't remember the controls of this level being this jank. Seriously, they're awful. I'm very glad we didn't end up with this kind of control scheme for platform mode, as I feel like there would be some people who would advocate for it. Anyhow, the ending was brutal and it took me almost 10 minutes to beat this. I normally wouldn't say this, but Rob must have been very drunk while rating this. I mean multiple beers down drunk. as this isn't a 5-star whatsoever. At least the icon helped me get a time of 5 seconds, not bad. After entering the Sandman and dodging a bunch of tricky obstacles including this Indiana Jones section, I would easily complete the level. Also, this part will probably get me demonetized. Nowhere was the first level I've seen that actually used spider orbs in its gameplay. I'm really hoping this orb doesn't die out, as I'm unsure why, but it feels like every orb that gets added nowadays just never gets used often. When was the last time you've seen red or black orbs used in a level that wasn't a one-off gimmick? Anyhow, the level plays pretty well, but I wish there's actual gameplay instead of hovering around the center of the level for a minute straight. Following this, I would enter New Dawn, which is a very interesting level by Sir Punch. While the atmosphere of the level was a bit intimidating and eerie in some sections, it also just felt like I was playing Geometry Dash EXE in some others. Level 25 would be Platmosphere, and I'm gonna be real, the level goes completely downhill after the first room, because for some reason the creator thought it would be funny. No, inverted controls aren't an interesting twist. It just makes an already new mode even more annoying to learn. Also, one of the teleporters is bugged to where it sometimes teleports you to a previous area and then despawns, or it just despawns before you even get there. Am I playing Minecraft? While the rest of the level is alright, the second room definitely soured my thoughts on it. Level 26 would be Cest, which is one of the easiest 4 stars I've come across. I've seen 2 stars harder than this. Anyway, the level plays surprisingly well, and I was even able to get a time of 30 seconds, which still wasn't enough for the leaderboard. Ouch. After exploring the deep forest in Harmony Disaster, I would play Leah Map, which is the complete opposite of Cest. Look, I may be doing this jump wrong, but this timing is brutal for a 5 mood. And it doesn't get much easier as we approach the Cubecopter section a few seconds later. And it already seems that the community forgot that there's a new game mode added. Jokes aside, this section is insanely difficult, and it took me quite a while to get the hang of. Eventually though, I was able to pass this Cubecopter part, and got rewarded with a very fun platformer section, which utilized spider orbs very well. Shame the rest of the level is so unbalanced. I would also get a new Path of Fire icon, just in time for Fire Tower. While this level is tricky in some areas, it's pretty unique and isn't too hard. Also, this decoration has seen some better days, just like this icon. Following this, I would play Crypt of the Undead, which really reminded me of a Matthew game level before I realized it was one. Anyhow, this boss is super fun, and despite it being a bit simpler compared to his other levels later in the video, it's still very fun. I was even on very low health towards the end and thought my run was over, but somehow still survived. Level 31 would be Reality Surf, which was insanely trippy. But so is the creator, because dude tripped up making this gameplay. It was so bad that I had to go into practice mode on a 5-star. The gameplay is the worst in the beginning due to the fact that there are these invisible slopes littered everywhere, meaning that if you jump where there is one, you die. This would be fine if every jump had this slope, but no, you have to play this Russian roulette with all of the jumps. The robot later in the level is pretty bad as well. Sometimes the camera filter gets thrown in right as you're about to time your jump. It's a shame though, the decoration goes hard. After this, I would explore Dark Castle, and despite the level having Rattle Dash, which would normally be a plus, he maniacally laughs at you every time you steal one of his keys to open the doors. This is propaganda. Rattle Dash would never do this to you. While the gameplay is decent, these platforms move slower than Rob's schedule, and I ended up getting stuck on this one part for a solid minute before I realized that you had to jump onto this hook to open a gate. Weird. Normally in 248, you're supposed to precisely match up these numbers together like that one mobile game you installed once and never played again. Fortunately, I was able to devise an intricate strategy of just, spamming. For some reason, if you spam and constantly spin the board around, you're able to complete the level and even get a coin. Can't complain. Level 34 would be Moonlight Peak, and I'm gonna be blunt, this level isn't peak whatsoever. The gravity trigger usage just feels... The camera rotation is way too extreme, and the time warp trigger makes this feel sluggish. Using the time warp trigger like this reminds me of what people did in early 2.0 to stretch out their levels. To add on to this, the level has absolutely no checkpoints, due to them supposedly breaking the level, but how does that happen? I don't get it. The jetpack also feels awkward to play with low gravity, but that might just be a skill issue. Level 35 would be the Turning Temple, where the level rotates every time you collect one of the keys. I absolutely love the concept. My only issue is that some areas feel really awkward to play, and for some reason, it feels like I'm always upside down. What if I told you that Squid Game Font would be one of the most challenging levels I would face thus far? The first two rooms were easy. Sure, they had some tricky platforming, but that's not where the true challenge lied. The final room was the hardest, as you had to collect these cogs while trying to avoid a flying stalagmite. While the teleporters do make juking it a lot easier, it's still pretty hard. I'm also unsure why, but getting this fourth cog is impossible unless you bounce on top of the drone's head. Maybe it's the intended route, but I honestly can't tell. After collecting all the needed cogs, you can finally beat the level, right? No, there's one final phase where the drone spits out a bunch of monsters that act like grenades and 4 more cogs spawn. This phase is more stressful than the ending of the long walk home, and I honestly don't even know how I got all the cogs on my final attempt, but I did. Finally, once you complete the level, we're called a Squid Gamer and receive 5 moons. FNAF 6 has nothing on this ending. After playing this extremely trippy beginning in Jolly, I ventured into the depths of New Depths, which had incredibly unique designs. I haven't seen this kind of stuff in platformers before. After being friend-zoned by this fisher, I entered the underwater section, which plays pretty well. The claustrophobic feel really reminds me of the old days of playing games like Hungry Shark, although it does make some sections really annoying to pass through. Despite me taking almost 20 minutes for a 5 moon, I still had a lot of fun on the level. Unlike Sversky, all of the comments were absolutely dogging on the level, but I ignored it. Washing away my doubts, the level starts off extremely well. It's hard to make pixel blocks look unique, but this level did it right. It also has an amazing atmosphere, but it all falls apart when we approach the boss, which took me almost 10 minutes to beat. The difficulty comes from how fast the boss is, and these unreadable falling platforms that instantly kill your runs certainly don't help. This is definitely more than a 5 moon. Speaking of moons, I would then play Extraterrestrial, which has a simple concept of you having to travel around the moon to mine rocks for samples. While the gameplay isn't anything crazy, the atmosphere of this level is incredible. It feels so lonely yet so hopeful. Sure, it isn't on the same level as something like Super Mario Galaxy in the graphics department, but it definitely put me in a similar mood to it. I just wish the concept was expanded upon more. Imagine exploring the whole solar system for these rock samples. That would be incredible. After this, I would explore Dash Cave, which has a really cool gimmick of dash orbs unlocking new areas of the map. It's really nice to see dash orbs incorporated into easier levels, because my ass cannot beat all these insane demon platformers. I hope more levels start doing this. Level 40 would be Backdrop, which has quite a lot of unique puzzles, like these cogs that completely change the level's gameplay, or using these sparks to move obstacles around in this ball section. I was also able to hit 200 moons with this level. I'm about to be rolling in that geometry cash. What wasn't so fortunate was the fact that harder levels were rolled. Things were about to get harder. See what I did there? Our first harder level would be the Undergrounds, and off the bat, bro is making me download a whole album with these sound effects. Anyhow, the beginning of the level is awesome, with well-crafted platforming and creative ball sections, until everything soon goes downhill. In this robot section, you have to collect these green arrows which lower the obstacles at the top, allowing you to pass, while the red arrows spawn more obstacles. Normally this would be pretty easy, but factoring in the fact that you have to avoid the teleportal until you've collected all the green arrows and the saws, it's pretty bad. After 5 minutes of excruciating pain, I passed this section, thinking the level was over, but surprisingly, it wasn't. The next part immediately caught me off guard as there wasn't a checkpoint, so if I died in this section, I would have to redo the robot all over again. The fact that this section was insanely tight didn't help calm me down, and I would end up dying attempting to get into this teleportal. I would end up having to redo the robot in Spider all over again, and would finally pass the last section easily. I honestly love this level. I despise when creators have well-placed checkpoints and good balancing. It just makes the playing experience worse. On the contrary, I would play Puseido Zone, which is one of my favorite platformer levels in this update thus far. While it is admittedly simple, I think it works in its favor and has very clever and intuitive puzzles that I didn't have to search up a tutorial for. Another leap for mankind. Some of the puzzles remind me of those Soviet remakes of official levels where you didn't jump the obstacles, but the obstacles jumped you. The level even wraps a cute bow by having an entire ending animation where it shows all of the moons they've collected. I love when creators do this. It makes it feel like an actual thing to work towards, not just another collectible. Another platformer level that would soon become one of my favorites was in The Castle, which is a remake of one of Robotic 24's older levels. And I'm gonna be real, this remake did not disappoint. After quickly escaping the mines and talking to a few NPCs, we enter the castle where there's turn-based combat in the style of Undertale, which works perfectly in platformer. Having well-made combat in 2.2 wasn't on my bucket list, but here we are. There's even an entire shop where you can buy exits to a level or user coins, which is incredibly well made. Anyhow, after easily fighting off a few foes, I would finish this absolute masterpiece in under 10 minutes. I really hope Robotic 24 doesn't stop making these because this series bangs. After this, I would play Frostfire Summit. It's not like the level is that challenging in itself. It's just the feeling of dying with 10 coins and having to recollect all of them isn't the greatest. I collected every coin I saw and still only got 35 out of 40. What a waste of time. Level 47 was Flash Trip and I was very skeptical from the comments, as many people pointed out that the jump indicators looked like spikes, which is worrying, until I entered the level. If you think this looks like a spike, then you need to get your eyes surgically changed. Don't get me wrong, the level isn't the most readable, but still, you just have skill issue. Level 48 was the Crypt, which was finally a good classic 2.2 level. I somehow sight-read the whole level and thought it was over, but no. I didn't know just yet what the level had in store for me. Rob hadn't played the ending of the level and didn't realize that the creator sneakily threw Congregation in there, significantly boosting the difficulty. Just kidding. Still though, this looming Congregation jump scare genuinely made me jump. Speaking of looming, this is Looming Labyrinth. This first room is overall pretty weird. I've never understood the appeal of confusing arrow trigger maces. All it felt like I was doing was spamming until I got through. And it didn't help that sometimes the conveyor belt broke if you fell back, so you have to constantly reset. On the contrary, the second room is pretty fun. While it is a bit tight, it doesn't feel as unfair as the arrow trigger section. Level 50 was Bomb Explosion, which had a very good start with the Rattle Dash cameo, who tells us that we have to rescue a sandwich because he's too hungry to move and retrieve it. Now, I'm not a conspiracist or anything, but I'm gonna put on my tinfoil hat and say this possibly gives lore that Rattle Dash wasn't always a skeleton. Anyhow, this robot is pretty tricky and took me a while due to the arrows shooting faster than my grades after 2.2 came out. Afterwards, we go to where the level truly shines. We enter this section where we have to use these bombs to launch us up the tower, a very unique mechanic I hadn't quite seen before in a platformer level. I've seen rocket jumping mechanics be used in a few creations, and while it's pretty tricky, it's also very rewarding, and something I definitely want to see more often. I did end up getting the sandwich for Rattle Dash, but not as fast as this player who got Rattle Dash the sandwich in 3 seconds. What an absolute goat. After this bomb explosion, I'd play the Infection. And hey, we finally got guns in Geometry Dash now. The level plays surprisingly well, and the puzzles revolving around the gun are super creative, especially with the time trials. Also, did I tell you that the level has a boss fight? Yeah, that's right. You have to fight this hunk who has 2 attacks, one where it lunges straight at you, and another where it shoots a deadly beam. Despite it being challenging, you get the hang of it pretty quickly, and it feels super rewarding to pass. This is how bosses should be made. Not something you should survive, but something you can directly fight back. I would then play Punch-Out, a very faithful recreation of the original game. Now at first, I didn't understand the controls at all and kept dying over and over again, until I realized that you're supposed to hit Mike Tyson and then dodge. With my newfound strategy, I was getting pretty far before I suffered a major blow from Mike Tyson. I couldn't give up though, I was so deep in. I kept going and miraculously survived all of his attacks without getting hit. Combi Matt Turk because that comeback was incredible. Maybe I should start a career in boxing like every other YouTuber who fell off. After the most heat drop in How to Build a Drop, I'd play Clockwork, which is the complete opposite of Lightwork, no reaction. I'm sorry. You see, you have to climb up this tower while a machine rises. Pretty simple. But I also had another objective, to collect these nuggets before reaching the end, which proved to be a grave mistake. This level is what made me remember that Geometry Dash is intended to be a rage game, as it wasn't easy whatsoever. While a lot of these obstacles were creative, they were also plain brutal, and these fists are my ops, I swear. After 20 minutes of collecting every nugget and surviving these obstacles like it was Wipeout, wait, just try to guess how many coins I got from collecting every single nugget in the level. Did I get A, no coins, B, 1 coin, C, 2 coins, or D, 3 coins? Well, if you guessed B, you'd be correct. I would get 1 measly coin in 6 moons. You're telling me I sacrificed my blood, sweat, and tears collecting all the nuggets for that? Since when did inflation come into this game? When I opened build up, my jaw dropped when the intro sequence played, as I thought I was sentenced to an eternity of this level. Fortunately, the level had checkpoints in every room, unlike other platformers, and the puzzles were creative enough to keep me going, allowing me to beat the level rather quickly. A pleasant surprise. Banger level all around. After one attempting a final space and claiming another mediocre fire path reward, I would play Icy Climbing, or I'd have to climb up Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated, attempting to brutally get every nugget. You know the drill. For some odd reason, you'd sometimes get stuck after using a pad and miss out on coins, forcing you to restart. I hope that someday Rob adds a system where you can go back to a specific checkpoint, because going all the way back to the start if I miss something isn't very fun. Anyhow, after some relatively easy gameplay, we enter the final area where the level's difficulty truly shines. During the first phase, these fireballs rotated like in Finger Dash. The difference was the fact that there was practically no dangers. You could stay in the center for the rest of the phase. Too easy? Don't worry, the level's got you covered as these fireballs rain onto you. While they are pretty difficult to dodge at first, they aren't too hard to memorize, and I was even able to snatch a coin. Still too easy? Well, how about these fireballs that are faster than Crano Milking 2.2 that are completely unreadable? That's more like it. The previous phases of the ending were somewhat well made. Sure, they may have tilted more on the easier end, but they were always sight readable and predictable if you paid attention to the patterns. But this section threw all of that out the water. Fortunately, I was able to miraculously pass it after a few tries. Level 58 would be Mozzie's Tower, which you guessed it, was another tower level. Before opening up the level, I read the comments and immediately saw that the coins in the level didn't do anything. Can we all agree on a guideline that collectibles give some reward like user coins? I know collectibles technically give points on a special leaderboard, but what clout am I gonna get from being at spot 97? I don't understand. Anyways, rant aside, the level is very easy. I was able to sight read the whole thing easily despite there being no checkpoints. Also, the coin here is free. There was definitely room for a coin with collectibles. I guess I was a little too harsh on the previous levels. I was sentenced to Death's Temple. Off the bat, these wall coins are definitely gonna become a trend due to Rob rushing the tower coins. Not like I'm gonna do the same too. I haven't seen anyone complaining. Despite a few sections being confusing at first, it's solid all around. Once I finished this stage, I thought I missed a coin somehow, but realized there's a little section at the end where you'd get a coin. Thanks for almost giving me a heart attack. I thought I was going insane. Another level that made me feel like I was going insane was Achievement Unlocked, which looked innocent at first, but I soon realized how confusing the achievements you had to collect would be. There are over 100 of them, ranging from running from one side of the map to the other without stopping, having a bunch of corpses on the screen at once, or even solving a math equation, which quite frankly is stupid since a sizable portion of the community is younger than Among Us nowadays. After scavenging through multiple replays, I would finish the level off after almost an hour. Definitely not worth the 6 moons. I would receive a quick breather with the temple beneath. There's no way this person wasn't a beta tester. The quality of the gameplay and decoration is insane. This robot section especially was very creative with these rings you had to slip through, and I was even able to snatch a coin. Sadly, I got too greedy and tried to steal this unidentified green diamond and fell into the Shadow Realm as a result. A daily occurrence. Jokes aside, this dark section had really good use of the UFO, and I was even able to snatch another coin. Congrats to the 2 people who beat this in 1 second. This speedrun scene is incredible. What was also incredible was the concept for Create, where the level lets you move the structures around. Despite being very comfortable with a lot of triggers from 2.1 and some from 2.2, I still have no idea how this is made. Unfortunately though, since my IQ is in the negative, I quickly got stuck and fell into my temptations, watching a replay for most of the puzzles. But I can still appreciate the effort put into this. This is insane. After this, I would play Super Geo Boy, and just like Super Meat Boy, the level had an incredibly well-made jumping mechanic, unlike some other levels. It would be really cool to see Rob implement an official wall jumping mechanic as a block state someday, but oh well, a man can dream. Speaking of RobTop, this is Evolved, which feels very RobTop styled, except for the fact that there's lava on the roof. I have a fleeting suspicion that isn't how gravity works. Anyhow, the level introduced mechanics, in my opinion, far better than Dash did. Despite how fun Dash was, the mechanics did feel more like one-off gimmicks compared to previous updates. For example, there are entire parts dedicated for spider orbs, teleport orbs, and the swing copter, which was used way more in this level than Dash. The swing copter sections were pretty brutal though. I can't tell if it's the decode wave effect where it's only harder because it's new, but damn, this game mode is hard to control. Level 65 would be Underdog, which I'm surprised was only given a star rating. This level was absolutely robbed. The gameplay was very sight readable, which I might only be saying because I fluked it first try, and the effects go hard. On the contrary, Wolf was the opposite. While some of the effects were really cool, the gameplay ruins any charm the level had. Sometimes you just clip through a structure and die, sometimes you can't even tell what's a block, and overall the level isn't very readable. It's a shame though, a lot of the effects actually looked neat, and the concept of throwing orbs into a swing copter was an interesting idea I hadn't yet seen. Another idea I hadn't yet seen was Bump Block Blitz, which I thought was gonna be one of those generic toggle to click levels, but was pleasantly surprised to see it involved momentum. I'm unsure why, but I love platformers that abuse momentum to fling you around the screen. They're super fun. I also appreciate when levels start out simple and slowly progress the concept as the level goes on, something that isn't really possible in classic levels due to balancing. After this, I would play Locomotive, which had an incredibly creative concept of you having to deactivate an explosive on a train before the time ran out. Unfortunately, one skill issue led to another, and I looked up a YouTube video since the gameplay was so confusing. While some of the concepts were hella cool, like these swapping pink and spider pads, the level overall just kind of feels annoying to play, but I can't put my finger on why. Considering the fact that Subwoofer was a beta tester, and that beta testers only had the beta for a month or two, it gives me hope that levels in 2.2 will become insane after a few months, but we'll have to see. Level 69 was Blink Block Blitz, which is admittedly a very clever concept where the shapes toggle on and off to the beats, but also admittedly very awful to play as there weren't any checkpoints in sight. Normally, this would just be something I'd shrug off, but it didn't help that a lot of the gameplay is pattern based, so you have to learn a jump, die, and repeat it all over again. Some trial and error is fine, but this took forever due to all the awkward timings that just didn't work. I haven't raged this hard at a level in a while, and after a devastating brain fart right at the end, I would eventually beat it. Call it a skill issue, but this definitely isn't a 7 moon. Level 70 was Cavern Constructs, which is another split level. While some of the platforming is a bit tricky, there are fortunately a lot of checkpoints littered everywhere. I'm surprised by how quick creators are. It's only been a week or two and players are already making platformers that are extremely fleshed out in their gameplay and decoration. These people can't be human, I swear. Level 71 was Throwback, which is a 2.0 nostalgia level. People need to seriously chill out. 2.0 wasn't released that long ago. Nostalgia levels aren't warranted since it's only been, it's been 7 years. Despite the obviously simple decoration, it's very fun and readable thanks to the camera triggers. This triple was scarier than a FNAF jump scare though. After this throwback, I would play the third ever legendary level, Subwoofer Lullaby, which off the bat had incredible visuals. The amount of detail in every single block is beautiful. Inevitably though, this caused the level to be very hard to read, because think about it, if a level focuses so much on visuals, gameplay is usually put aside. Always wondered why some of the most popular levels have atrocious gameplay? I would even have to go into a practice run just to beat this, and unfortunately the original Minecraft level still clears. Following this, I would open Cube Mode, which also fell into a similar boat. While the visuals were incredible, it felt like I was playing 3-Dash. It was also really hard to understand where I was in rooms like Room 7, where you have to be in very specific spots to traverse up and down. Most of the level's difficulty just comes from memorizing the controls. I had to rebeat this due to my recording corrupting, and it was easier than not getting your level rated. RobTop. Also, speaking of which, what happened to 3-Dash? This game was everywhere, then the developer just dipped. I wonder why. In Speedster, you're given this card that you're able to go Mach 12 if you wanted to, but no one said anything about going extremely slow. Since the barriers on the map kill you and there aren't any checkpoints, going even slightly fast is extremely penalizing, so I guess I'll stick to the slightly less impressive route. After downloading the entire sound effects library, I would play Hollow Dungeon, which is definitely one of the most creative platformer levels I've ever seen, which really isn't a surprise, as the creator, ex-CreatorGoal, has covered every single detail of this update for years, so he was definitely plotting something before it dropped. Anyhow, it has very creative puzzles, like this color one where you have to stand on the correctly colored tile a few times to pass. My only nitpick is that if you die, it rolls the same set of tiles every time, but that's an issue with the random trigger itself, so I'll let it slide. After this, I would have to battle my inner Larrys. The idea is that Larry can jump and shoot rings to kill you, but if you're able to dodge those and bounce on its head, you can deal some damage, like a Goomba. I only needed to deal 5 hits. How hard could this possibly be? Very. It's usually impossible to predict where Larry will jump, and he low-key has an aimbot hack turned on. The ending doesn't get much better as the shell he turns into after bonking him gets faster and these walls close in. Fortunately, I had this insanely lucky clutch that let me score a win. When I entered Cold Core, I was given the option to select a weapon. A slow but deadly sword, a fast but weak blade, an extremely fast saw, or nothing. Knowing me, I obviously picked nothing. I had already decided after taking a quick peek at the comments, where everyone was talking about the saw blade meta. I started off on a pretty bad pace, as the first boss was difficult due to me not having a healing source yet, causing me to drain nearly all of my health. Fortunately, after beating this boss, I was given a few healing bots, which made the second boss a breeze, something I couldn't say about the third and final one, which looked straight out of the Calamity mod for Terraria. Despite it requiring a lot more strategy than the previous bosses, I still easily slayed it like the goat I am. This challenge was getting pretty difficult though, so I decided to take a quick break and open up Celeste. This is too loud, let me just change the volume. Oh, this? Yeah, I don't even have to buy Celeste now. On a serious note though, I really don't understand the hate behind the level, or recreations in general. Every time I see an exciting recreation get released, everyone immediately begins dogging on it, saying RobTop is gonna get sued or these players are recreating them for profit, which I personally don't get. It's not that deep. Sure, it's always better to see newer stuff, but I'm also not forking over 20 bucks for Celeste, so I'm fine with it. Anyhow, the level is pretty short, and I was wondering why it wasn't Demon until I realized that there's only a few rooms. What wasn't so short though was the harder category's lifespan. It had taken me through a great deal of this challenge, but inevitably, insanes were rolled. Things were about to get insaner. I need to stop. Our first insane level was Super Gem Hunt 64, which was definitely far from controversial. Off the bat, I can't lie, the level starts off good but gets very frustrating in the later levels. Room 13 and 14 especially were the hardest, even harder than the final room, and once you reach the end, you'd have to backtrack all the way back. Something I'm not a fan of since it inflates difficulty a lot. Since I wasn't really a Flash kid and was more of a mini-clip kid, I can't give the level any nostalgia points, and stuff like you not being able to stick to moving objects was something I never got used to. Room 15 was pretty funny though, I can't lie. Since the level is intentionally worse, I guess my points are like talking to a brick wall. But still, this is almost half an hour of my life I won't get back. Which still wouldn't be worse than the core, which took me nearly an hour. Why? Well, after picking up a star cannon and a suspicious voodoo doll, I would summon a wall of flesh. This boss had an incredibly creative idea of you having to go on extra paths to collect stars, which directly deal damage. Unfortunately, that's all I can give the level credit for, as this level is excruciating. Small issues like these stars that are really hard to snatch sometimes, and these spikes that are hard to notice when you're going at the speed of light really do add up. It genuinely felt like I was playing a classic level. I had to practice it, learn a lot of timings, and had no checkpoints. If I want to do that, I'll just play a classic level. And in all honesty, this comment says it all. It doesn't matter how many platformer demons you've beaten, but how many insanes you've beaten. Fortunately, I would receive a break with platformer circles. I guess 9 circles will be the cockroach of the community, something that never dies no matter the odds. I read the comments before I played and noticed the amount of hate it was receiving, and that it should have been rated a demon instead of 9 moons, which isn't true at all. Unlike Firstly, this was way easier than what the comments were waffling about. Sure, some sections aren't easy by any means, but they're extremely short, and when you compare them to the core, they look like 2 stars. Also, the slopes at the drop are very fun to glide through, and despite having multiple fails, I never got frustrated with them. After going to what I thought was heaven, I was sent to a recreation of the Impossible game 2, which has very weird gravity. Was the original game intended for audiences who play on Jupiter? Anyhow, these triples littered everywhere were brutal, and due to the gravity trigger being cranked up 11, they're 10 times harder than regular triples. Even worse, the triples were halfway into the level, so every time you died to one of these triple spike corridors, you'd have to play a pre-drop longer than the long walk home. I'm certain my heartbeat at the end must have passed 200 beats per minute, I swear. Following this, I would stumble upon Flip Swap Galaxy, which is a recreation of that galaxy from Super Mario Galaxy. While the level did have a cool mechanic, I can't help but notice that it did feel scuffed when it came towards launching yourself a long distance, and I often found myself getting lost in the simplest sections. Even the creator hopes that the level will get re-rated to an easy demon. If that doesn't prove my point from earlier, I don't know what will. Platformer ratings feel more scuffed than Skibbity Toilet Dash. I would keep pushing with Pushing Onward, which is a recreation of VVVVV, keeping its super cool gimmick of going off screen to access otherwise impossible areas. Seems like the edge trigger is being put to good use. Anyways, the level started off very easy, and while some of the later sections were difficult, they were nothing compared to the final room. Initially, when you enter this room, it looks fairly easy, as all you have to do to pass it is cross this structure. But to pass it, you have to fly through 7 brutal rooms while having absolutely no time to react. Even RobTop asked the creator who hurt him. That's when you know it's bad. On the contrary, I'd play Oddments, and it bangs. The effects are incredible, and is everything I hope 2.2 to be. Satisfying effects that weren't overbearing but made the level feel fresh. This backwards wave definitely brought back some nightmares though. What was also a nightmare was Cosmetics, which took forever due to half of the jump indicators leading you straight to your death. And the strange camera rotation at the end of the level that should never be used unless that section is laughably easy. I don't want to rotate my entire setup just to play this. Cosmetics wasn't the only level guilty of this, as Industrialization suffered a similar fate as well. It's a shame too, because certain segments in this level genuinely stand out, but they're overshadowed by poor balancing and perplexing sections. This Wingcopter part especially is confusing, and turned the level into one of my first attempt grinders in a hot minute. To make matters worse, I had an agonizing 94% fail at the final section. It makes me wonder, what's the point of tackling insane levels? Considering the amount of effort required, it seems more practical to grind easy demons and notch up one more stat on your profile, but oh well. When I came across Run to the Hills initially, I was pretty disappointing, because while the double jump mechanic introduced wasn't bad per se, it wasn't too unique either. Fortunately, I was pleasantly surprised by the boss later in the level. Looks like we're playing Terraria again. Anyhow, in the first phase, the boss is similar to that one Desert Kingdom boss in Super Mario Odyssey, where you have to fight a pair of hands. When one of the hands goes red, it slams down and summons a bunch of deadly spikes on the floor. When it goes yellow, it slams the platform and breaks it, which in turn makes you vulnerable to spikes if the other hand went red. If, on the off chance it went green though, it slams into the ground, and instead of summoning spikes, you can stomp on it to take 1 health away from that hand. After killing off one of the hands, you enter the final phase, where the boss starts using secondary attacks, like a falling boulder, an explosive skull, or a homing missile, which is incredibly difficult to dodge sometimes. It wouldn't take me long to finally edge out and finish off this boss. This is how you make a boss. This is perfect. Absolute perfection wouldn't last very long though, as I then had to play Snake Block Ruins, which is one of the first levels thus far that's felt like a proper demon. 9 moons for this is nothing. The level has a ton of creative platforming and used the concept to the fullest it possibly could have, but I just never found myself enjoying it. As much as I raged, I couldn't really be mad at the level though. I just wish it was easier, or rated somewhere in the easier medium demon territory. Just because a level has checkpoints doesn't mean it disqualifies it from being a demon. Anyhow, I would eventually beat the level after half an hour, and even though I missed one nugget I needed for a coin, I at least had 2 insane clutches at the end, so I'm chilling. these demons in disguise wouldn't end there, as I then stumbled across Phlogiston, which eerily reminded me of a map pack level, with the classic decoration, horrible balancing, and brutal checkpoints. Anyhow, after an excruciating 98% fail and 200 attempts, I would pass this miserable creation. 200 is more than most easy demons I play. Putting my thinking space cap on, I just don't get how this was featured. Old style levels are fine if they're fun, like Throwback by Osk, but Electrodynamics Yellow straight up isn't it. After this, I would play It Chases, where this eye chases you, just like that wall of flesh in the core, but instead of dealing damage, you have to collect keys to open a bunch of doors. As much as I dislike the flesh wall boss fight, I do prefer the former of fighting back. Fortunately though, to make up for this, the level has a ton of checkpoints scattered everywhere, so issues like these moving spikes that aren't indicated are slightly more forgiving. Aside from that, the level plays pretty well, but the eye chasing you isn't really visible for the entire level, unless you're really sloppy with the ending sequence, so it isn't too hard. Definitely not a demon level like some people were calling it out for. Zaporoslavia was one of the strangest levels I've come across. The start of the level is pretty normal, enjoyable even, but when you approach the drop, things get weird. We're thrown into a boss fight, and Chechia begins launching a bunch of rice cakes and even a beer. After obviously missing the goat, Slovakia shoots out a mysterious substance at us, which is quite difficult to dodge, and even tries to end my icon's life by using an axe. Dark. Finally, Poland decides to take charge and starts trying to stab us with vodka bottles, which clearly didn't work very well, prompting Poland to shoot a literal car at us. Now, I might be a bit overdramatic, but that's a pretty expensive solution to get rid of a cube. Overall, the level was pretty fun, but I do feel like the boss could have been more readable at times. Despite my footage corrupting and me being forced to rebeat the level, I had a ton of fun with this map and the non-boss parts play surprisingly fluidly. I would then play Dastardly, another level subwoofer likely made during the long beta, which shows because this is a very well crafted 2.2 level. Parts like the ship, spider, and wave play very well, but I can't say the same for the ending duel. As someone who fluked the ending, flex, I know, I still think it plays really badly since I'm not even focusing on the gameplay, just where the green arrows are. If I want to look at arrows, I can play Friday Night Funkin'. Level 94 was exactly what people were worried was gonna happen when people saw camera effects in 2018. While some of the effects are fresh, it feels like I'm playing the Slaughterhouse montage for the whole level. If you played this blindfolded, it would be the same difficulty because the effects make half of the clicks unreadable. What also wasn't so readable was New Horizons. After being introduced to the firework mechanic and testing it out on a dummy, we approached the Cursed Thorn. Or, I guess, the Cursed Worm. The way you fight back is by following this firework orb and launching them back at the worm. Unfortunately though, it's impossible to tell where on Earth the orb is unless you track it, which definitely isn't easy when there are hundreds of hazards on the screen at once. This would have greatly benefited from using player health instead of killing you the moment you touch any hazard, like in the castle, and using a way more forgiving advanced follow system, since it just spawns into the screen instantly sometimes. This boss could have been an absolute masterpiece like Run to the Hills, but unfortunately the level fell just short. And it didn't end there, as the inevitable happened. Demon levels were rolled. Who knew what all these devious creators were plotting? Luckily, all of these levels had made me master the new physics. Sure, this wasn't gonna be an easy fight, but I was prepared to conquer the last 5 demons. Our first demon level was Shiftleaf Temple, which is a pleasant surprise. If you didn't know, the map was created by Tride, and has a gimmick of moving these blocks around anytime you move left or right. And while the level did make me feel very stupid the whole way through, I got very consistent towards the end, and was able to clear my first platformer demon after half an hour. Another pleasant surprise was Forsaken City, which was Shiftleaf Temple on steroids. At the beginning, the level was incredibly frustrating, and I couldn't get the hang of it. But throughout the map, the movement became incredibly satisfying to pull off, and I had so much fun that I didn't even notice the level ended. This only took 11 minutes, but unfortunately, I wasn't as fast as Ohio Rizzler 1012, who beat this in a whopping 200 milliseconds. Hats off to him. Following this, I would play Hole in the Wall, which had an incredibly cool concept of, well, dodging the walls, but to be desired execution. The level requires a ton of trial and error since there are no checkpoints, so if you die at the last 3 clicks, you have to trudge all the way back there. It doesn't help that all of these walls use invisible blocks for some reason, which, while not difficult in a normal level, are very hard to read when 4 walls are coming to you at the same time. After a terrible fail right at the end, I would finally pass it, not knowing what was in store for the next 2 levels. Level 99 was the infamous jet lag, one of the first demons ever created for platformer mode. The entire level was non-stop tight jumps, no creative concepts and ideas like Forsaken City or Shiftly Temple, no interesting 2.2 mechanics, almost no checkpoints, just raw timings like this brutal dash orb. If it weren't for the fact that this was in platformer, I would think this was made in 2.1. Despite me dying at the ending several times, I would soon beat it afterwards. With one more level left, I continued pushing. Hundreds of hours would all be put to rest, with one final level. Level 100 was Coaster Mountain, which I can't lie, has really good world building and atmosphere, something Serpanja is well known for, but it begins to fall apart when you get to the gameplay. While slopes definitely aren't a bad gimmick by any means, totally relying on them makes the level excruciatingly inconsistent. A setup that worked one attempt may just not work the next attempt, and it never felt like I was in control, especially when you're flying up and down them. Even the break sections weren't easy, as areas like this that have wind blowing took me way longer than I'd like to admit, bringing me to the final area. This challenge was honestly kind of symbolic. I had come so far, I had reached the summit, and all I had to do was descend down the mountain. I took a deep breath and began trying. The hardest part was definitely the zigzag section, where it felt like again the slopes worked differently every other attempt. Sometimes it would launch you off, sometimes it wouldn't. It just depended on how the game felt. Alongside that, these wind volcanoes aren't very consistent in themselves, and pairing them with already inconsistent slopes caused me to die hundreds of times. But finally, just a few seconds short of the 1 hour mark, I finally finished it off, zipping down the zipline in relief. This challenge I had set off over 2 months ago was finally over, allowing me to rest. Consider checking out this challenge but with recent levels, and thanks for watching.